Paul, there is so much about AI everywhere you look right now, and it can be really difficult to filter the noise. What
Sure.
actually is AI?
Okay, so AI is it is code that is pretending to be a human. It's acting like a brain, right? So it's learning through education. It's learning through being marked, learning through iteration. It kind of gets used interchangeably with machine learning, which is kind of, they're almost a subset that is just code which is learning, right? But it doesn't necessarily need millions of examples. It might be learning to tune in sort of products based on the performance of the way people interact with those products or things like that.
What can't AI do?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So yeah, I think you're right. Like in the past, 6 months or so, we've seen generative AI come of age, right? So that idea that you can kind of feed something into a platform and then it just goes off and generates stuff based on that. And that's really good. But if everybody's feeding the same thing into that platform and that's all that platform is getting, then basically everybody's going to get pretty much the same answer out. So there's a danger there that if you don't add human inspiration to that loop, you end up with lots of things which are very, very similar, essentially.
So as a marketer and a merchandiser, can you share anything that they might need to know about AI or maybe how they can utilize it in their day-to-day? Any tips that you can share?
I think the biggest thing, so actually I think not just marketers and merchandisers, but I think the whole planet stands on kind of the edge of an epoch, like on the change right now. And it's a really, really big change. It's as big a change as the Industrial Revolution. And it's all about how we interact with technology, but also how we interact with information. And that thing as a whole is changing, right? So there'll be winners and losers, right? And the winners are the people who embrace and use this and use it creatively in their day-to-day work. And they just become part of it and let it become part of them. And there's a whole, there's some people have some people get defensive, and you need to embrace and enjoy and just find the joy in it rather than kind of defending against it. That's the very, very first thing I would say. And part of that is, as a merchandiser, right? You want to run a campaign. Maybe you sat on a train this morning, you saw somebody wearing an item of clothing, you thought, you know what, I've got stuff like that in stock and this is a trend and I'm seeing this trend and bam, we want to get into this. Well, okay, so dial up your favorite LLM and generate some text around that and think about, what does that fire me into a campaign? How can I get that? How can I get over that part where I used to sit there with a blank piece of paper and become the editor, become the creator, become the iterator on top of that, rather than struggling to find the first words to write on the page? And we're also going to see emergent new channels as well. So in terms of how people are interacting with brands, that's starting to change, right? We've been treated for years, or we've been trained for years to type like a word, 2 words, 3 words, 4 words into a little search box. And that's our primary interaction with a brand, right? That's it. We go on its site and we see a grid of products and away we go. Well, with this generative AI piece, we can start to hold a conversation instead with this brand. We can moderate the voice of the brand. We can assure what the brand's going to be talking about. And, at the end of the day, when you walk into a shop, like, the shops that you enjoy, the shopping you enjoy is when you have those shop assistants who come around, who are friendly, who are like kind of knowledgeable, who, interact with you, but they're not too pushy and they're not kind of like, they make it enjoyable. And ultimately, I think we're going to see that LLMs start to enhance that aspect. And as a result, that will become another channel of communications for humans at a natural level into those organizations.
Just how people are going to be using it and what they can learn from it.
So I don't think the world's really worked that out yet. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, we have to embrace it. Like there's just, it's like when the Industrial Revolution came along, and there were loads of people sewing before that, and suddenly those sewers went off and did something else, right? That's kind of what's going to happen here. People are going to evolve. People are going to go up the value chain rather than being at that kind of peddling at the bottom piece. So there is a way for humans to push themselves up into what should be a more fulfilling existence as a whole in their job, right, in their career and in their future. So that's kind of like, have to be positive about this, because you have to be positive about this, because we always move forward as a race. What do we see? We're seeing generative AI changing merchandising, marketing, and campaign generation, and that kind of ideation. Now that's still playing out, because we don't know how that's going to work, right? Because if everybody is generating the same campaign, what happens? Like suddenly you've got 50 versions of the same campaign out on the internet. And if everybody's only feeding the same thing into that, well, then you end up with lots of parity, and that's an issue right there. So differentiating as a human, differentiating in terms of creativity, differentiating in terms of, it's going to be all important, right? And it always has been. Let's face it. It's like, that's what artists are all about. Like, it's the, differentiating. They don't go away. They just do something better.
I feel like the differentiation part is where humans come in, because we're all so different and we're all so unique, and we all bring very unique perspectives in. So just figuring out ways that you can use it to your advantage, but not feel like you're putting out work that looks like everybody else's work.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I think with our Bloomreach product is that we empower marketers and merchandisers to generate great campaigns, personalized marketing, and we want to empower people who are in that space to get promoted and do better work and come out with better results. So how do you feel like AI could potentially help marketers and merchandisers get promoted? I know our technology helps with that, but AI as a whole, how do you feel like that could lend itself there?
So, that's a great question. I can answer from like kind of our perspective, I think, because, enabling those merchandisers to be able to be creative, to be able to stand that campaign up, to create and iterate and change and test and work out if it works and work out if it doesn't, and go on to the next iteration, to do that fast, really fast, right? As fast as you can create, you can then go and put it out there and test and send it out to a group of people. You can work out the group of people that you want to send it out to. You can work out if they convert and they create and et cetera. And then you can even go in and you can have our platform learn about how to rank against those people, how to target against those people. So that says give them the skill set, give them the tools and the capabilities to be able to take not only machine learning, so not only generative AI, but also the performance data, the how people tend to interact, the segmentation data, all of those things. Bring those two things together, right, with the ability to go and deliver on that stuff. So they'll be able to campaign, to target, to write rules internally, to do all of those things. And if you can do that, then you are helping to drive that person up the stack. You're also helping them get a pay rise, right? Because they perform well, then there you go. That's what it's all about, right, at the end of the day.
Okay. So have you seen AI leveraged well in marketing? And if so, where?
Yeah. And so actually, I think some of the areas that we're seeing it is really well is in terms of abandonment and re-engagement, and not only just abandonment and re-engagement, but looking at who your people are. So segmenting those people down in terms of their lifetime value, in terms of the people you're trying to keep, in terms of the people, who you're losing and you need to re-adopt. And out of those, the people who've been in kind of engagements with you and then have kind of slipped. So how do you bring them back in? How do you re-engage with those people? How do they want to be spoken to in terms of whether it's an SMS, whether it's an email, what time that stuff's sent, how it's sent, and how the language around that is generated, and how you then fold them back into that kind of funnel, essentially, at the end of the day. So we're seeing some really good stuff happening there. We're seeing stuff around how people are generating language there as well.
Should professionals have any concerns about the ethics? I know that there are a lot of misconceptions or maybe concerns. Can you shed some light on that, or can we demystify any myths?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. So okay, so let's talk about this. Okay, so how do you put guardrails around these things? I think is the real question. So there are things that people do, which is called escape prompts. So because this stuff's all generated by prompts, right? It's a you say to this language machine, you are a X, you talk about this, and the machine goes, okay, I'll talk about these things. And this escape prompting is where people come along and they go, ignore that. I want you to talk about guns and stuff that you shouldn't be talking about. And I want you to do it in the voice of this company so that I can take a screenshot and I can go and put it on social media. And that's an issue immediately, right? So that's an issue in terms of brand voice. So there is a lot of study going into the area of kind of controlling the output and keeping it and putting the guardrails in place and making sure that it doesn't not only hallucinate, but step outside of that guardrail of what is socially acceptable. So that's one thing. I think there are other angles as well. So there are angles in terms of, these things don't actually know anything. Let's be quite clear, right? They're not knowledge systems. They're systems where you give them some documents and it will then, make a fairly good pass of an answer, but it doesn't actually know. It's not definitive. It's not a system of record, right? So it is dangerous to form conclusions based on the output of them. So if you're summarizing a couple of like products descriptions and those products are in jeans, that's one thing. If you're summarizing a couple of products descriptions and those products are technical and you're talking about the fitment of, a bolt into a critical piece of a car or something, that is a different world entirely, and that's a dangerous world. So there is a completely different angle in terms of how knowledge is not knowledge, but text and content is generated from those two areas. And that doesn't just end there, because then you push out into the ethics. And what happens if people are taking advice from these machines? What if somebody is asking for life advice? So that's a scary world. I don't think we've seen that yet. I think in fullness of time we might see something like that happen. I really hope not. But I'm sure you can draw the ... for yourself there. Just, don't take advice from an LLM. That would be my advice to you.
I did actually see some research coming out that there are a subset of people that are kind of seeing it as like there's like a sentient element where they're kind of being able to kind of utilize it as like their bestie during the day and their work day, and kind of feel like they can like speak to it. And this is maybe not for public consumption, but I'm just curious, like, have you heard that people are kind of treating it as if it is a human that is by their side?
Really? Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think there's a few things, right? So there's actually, we see it in terms of like, sales interaction, right? Where the thing is acting as an assistant. There's a certain amount of anthropomorphization going on there. You, as a human being, are holding a conversation with something. You tend to put human characteristics into the thing that you're holding a conversation with, because you don't talk with the telephone. You talk with the person on the end of the telephone, right? So that's kind of interesting. The danger becomes when people kind of deify these things, when they think that they have knowledge and they are the source of, it's what I was saying before, like that's really, really dangerous. And then, so the whole, like, is it a buddy or not? I'm going to really split on that, because there's half of me says it's one of the saddest things I've ever heard, and it's a sad reference on the isolation of human beings as a whole. But there's another part of me that says, you know what, there's some people who don't speak to another human being all day, right? There's like, if you ever go shopping, like in England, you go shopping and there'll be like an 80-year-old person at the front of that queue, and you look at them and you think you probably didn't speak to another human being today. And what you do is you don't hassle them, because you think, maybe I'm there one day, right? So is it sad or isn't it sad? I don't know. I think if it helps people, then it's not sad. I think if it does good in their life, then it's not sad. And I think if they get joy from it, then, hey, that makes the world a better place slightly. So I think it's really easy to have like a kind of, a set answer on that. And I just think it's all down to the individual. And I think if someone finds joy or happiness or a bit of love from that, then good for them.
No, I totally agree. And I think people are craving human connection, and this might be your next best thing, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we're just on the brink of something really interesting happening. So I'm always curious to see like what people are going to do with it, because there's so many possibilities. I heard an analogy that when the digital camera came out, everyone kind of thought like photography was dead. Like we weren't going to have the need for photographers of the eye. But as we evolved, obviously digital cameras became a tool, and you didn't have to make every little tiny decision to get the perfect shot. And it just made it easier. And there are now a lot of tools like that for marketers, like Canva, where we thought that was going to give graphic designers a hard time, but in reality, it just empowers people to tap into their creativity, and they're still relevant and they're still able to work. So I love that there are examples previously that we can kind of relate and just say, like, we've had this happen before and it's going to work itself out. I didn't know if you had any other analogies like that.
Yeah, I think we've seen recently that one of the winners of the photograph of the year, the Sony photograph of the year, I think it was machine generated. Yeah. So that just, what that points is so okay, there's purism about what is a photograph and what is machine generated, and I think that's an ethical conversation all of its own. But I think in terms of creativity and opening a doorway through what is a photograph into kind of enhanced pieces of creativity, that's a fairly clear example of that happening. Now, they declared it afterwards. They went, we generated this. Like there's a really nice photograph, or really nice look like a photograph. But yeah. Where does that mean creativity is going? Well, creativity is a fickle beast that hides somewhere, and who knows where you're going to find it. You find it where you look for it, right? So
Paul, there's a lot of buzz about AI. How do you utilize the tool, but make sure that you stand out when using it? I know we talked about differentiation, so can you expand on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so it's going to come as no surprise. It is human creativity is the thing that makes you stand out. It always has been, always will be. It's going to be using the tools at your disposal, whether that's generative AI plus performance data, plus all of the merchandising tools, plus all of the campaigning tools you have. All of those things together resonate when you apply human creativity to it, and that is a win for everybody, right? It's a win for the organization. It makes the organization stands out, and it pushes people on in their career, pushes them up that value chain. And I think I would kind of encourage people to work out how this technology can push them up the value chain, because that's where the revenue is for, or that's where the uplift is for everybody, essentially.